have to fill the bin in the small barn for Quintus Sertorius first, because he's an old horse and doesn't like to wait. And then we went back to the cows and the tie-up to milk. My father said Joseph could watch, but after today he'd be helping. Joseph stood with his back against the wall. When the cows turned and looked at him, they didn't say a thing. Not even Dahlia. They kept pulling on the hay and chewing like they do. That means they thought he was okay. When my father got to Rosie, he asked Joseph if he'd like to try milking her. Joseph shook his head. She's gentle. She'd let anyone milk her. Joseph didn't say anything. Still, after my father was done and he'd taken a couple of full buckets out to the cooler, Joseph went up behind Rosie and reached out and rubbed the end of her back, right above her tail. He didn't know that Rosie loved anyone who rubbed her rump, so when she mooed and swayed her behind, Joseph took a couple of quick steps back. I said, "She's just telling you she's—" "I don't care," said Joseph, and he left the barn. The next morning, though, when the three of us went out to the big barn to milk, Joseph went to Rosie first, and he reached out and rubbed her rump again, and Rosie told Joseph she loved him. That was the first time I saw Joseph smile. Sort of. Joseph had never touched a cow's rump before, or her teat even. Really. So he was terrible at milking. And even though I kept rubbing her rump while Joseph was being terrible at milking, Rosie got pretty frustrated. And finally, she kicked over the pail because Joseph didn't have his leg out in front of hers. It didn't matter much because there was hardly any milk in it anyway. Joseph stood up just when my father came in. My father looked at the pail and the spilled milk, then at Joseph. "I think there's something you need to finish there, Joseph," he said. "You need milk this bad, there's probably a store where you can get some like normal people," he said. It was the longest string of words he'd said. "I don't need the milk," said my father. He pointed at Rosie. "But she needs you to milk her." "She doesn't need me to—" "She needs you." My father stacked his two pails to the side, then righted Joseph's pail underneath Rosie. "Sit down on the stool," he said. It took a few seconds, but Joseph came and sat down, and my father knelt beside him and reached beneath Rosie. "I'll show you again. With your thumb and forefinger, you pinch off the top, like this, and then let your fingers strip the milk down, like this." A squirt of milk against the metal side. Another. Another. Then my father stood. A few seconds. More than a few. Then Joseph reached under and tried. Nothing. "Thumb and forefinger tight, then run down your other fingers." Joseph tried again. My father took over rubbing Rosie's rump. She mooed once, and then the squirting began. It was slow and not all that steady, but Joseph was milking, and soon the sound in the pail wasn't the sound of milk on metal, but that foamy sound of milk in milk. My father looked at me and smiled. Then he went around behind Joseph to pick up the pails he'd stacked. And bang! Joseph leaped up as if something had exploded beneath him. His pail got knocked over again, and the stool, and Rosie mooed her afraid moo. And Joseph stood with his back against the barn wall with his hands up. And even though he usually didn't look at anyone, he was looking at us and breathing fast and hard. Like there wasn't enough air in the whole wide world to breathe. My father looked at him, and I could see something in my father's eyes I'd never seen before. Sadness, I guess. "I'm sorry, Joseph. I'll try to remember," he said. He bent down and picked up his pails. "I'll finish here. You boys better go back to the house and get washed up. Jack, tell Mom I'll be a few minutes." It was almost dawn when we went outside. Joseph and me. The peaks to the west were lit up and spilling some of the light down their sides and onto our fields, all harvested and turned and ready for the long winter. You could smell the cold air and the wood smoke. The pond had broken panes of ice on the edges, enough to annoy the geese, and from the small barn you could hear Quintus Sertorius at his grain, snorting in his bin. Rosie mooed inside the barn. Everywhere in the gray yard, color